The following is a true scary story about someone who used Tinder and wasn't as careful as they should have been. This is a shorter video because it's a warm-up for the collaboration coming later today. That one will be in the afternoon, so make sure you keep an eye out for it. It's going to be an awesome collaboration with Top 10's Net. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Let's begin. Around March of 2014, I started talking to this girl on Tinder. She seemed cool and fun, and after about a week of talking, she suggested we meet in person. She invited me to this coffee shop, and I accepted. However, the day of, she started messaging me, saying she had to tell me something. Her pictures on Tinder weren't actually of her, and yes, she was a guy. He claimed he really liked talking to me though, and begged me to still meet up with him. Naturally, I declined, and I blocked his profile and continued on with life. About a week later, I started talking to another girl. Once again, she seemed cool and fun, and we hit it off. She asked me if I spoke to people on Tinder frequently, and rather stupidly, I told her about my previous encounter with the man lady. Weeks later, I would realize that this new girl was the same girl as the week before. She asked me if I wanted to meet up, and I said sure, as long as it was in a public place. We decided on a cafe, and the next day I sat at the table waiting. 5, 10, 15 minutes had passed, and she was still nowhere to be found. I then peered out the window and saw, from across the street, a man staring at me intently. I looked away, waited a few seconds, and looked back. He was still standing there staring. At this point, I left the cafe, got on my bike, I always ride a bike everywhere, and booked it home. I was definitely a little freaked out, but tried to pull myself together and reasoned that no one could have followed me. I then deleted my Tinder profile, and things were normal for a few weeks. About 3 weeks later, I started getting phone calls. The numbers all showed up as unknown. I picked up the phone the first few times to some guy breathing heavily into the phone. I was already a little freaked out. After about a day, I stopped picking up any calls unless it displayed the caller's name. I then started receiving texts. At first they were pretty harmless. Calls for attention and begging to meet in person. And then it changed to very sexual texts, until eventually the messages became threatening, and whoever was messaging me started throwing out my family and friends' names and whereabouts, saying he/she would get them involved unless I answered. Because they were texting me, I could see a displayed number, but when I called the phone providers, they told me the number couldn't be traced and that it was probably a track phone. Great. I waited about 2 weeks, not responding to the text, thinking I shouldn't fuel the troll, but eventually it became too much. I started getting upwards of 50 texts and phone calls a day. I would wake up to 10 through 20 texts every morning. I then decided to change my number altogether. The texting and calls stopped for a while, but sure enough, it started happening again. I called my phone provider asking if they could give out numbers at a user's request, and they said their policy stated that they wouldn't/couldn't unless valid identification was provided. Then one day, I tried logging into my Facebook, but was denied. Within a day, friends started contacting me asking me what the hell I was doing, saying that they were getting terrible messages from my account. In particular, one of my girlfriends was receiving messages about her mom who died years ago. I apologized profusely and told people what was going on. I contacted Facebook and explained the situation, and they helped me access my account again. At which point, I deactivated it for a while. Enough was enough. I decided to contact the FBI, explaining what had been going on for over a month now. They documented everything, but told me since I, or any of my relatives/friends, were in no immediate danger, they probably wouldn't be able to do anything. At this point, I felt stuck. I thought about hiring a private investigator or a hacker. I decided against it, however, and just hoped it would fade out if I never answered. I left my Facebook deactivated and ignored any texts or phone calls. I never had any trouble at home, but some of my closest friends received the occasional texts as well, which weirded us all out. I hate that they got dragged into it. One day I came home, and things felt very eerie. Door unlocked, windows open, and no one home. A strong breeze was running through the apartment. I did a check of the place and found nothing else weird, so I locked everything up and just waited for my roommates to get home. It's been almost 7 months now. The calls and texts have more or less stopped. I'll get an occasional text, but at most one every 2 weeks. At the peak of it, I was receiving almost 100 texts a day. It definitely affected my social and personal life. I became much more weary of the people around me and my surroundings. I just felt like I couldn't really focus on anything until this stopped. Work was difficult, though I tried to maintain my composure as best I could. Everything was just weird. Life was weird. I've since stopped using all forms of dating apps and websites. Things are getting back to normal, and at this point, I just want to put it all behind me. I'm moving at the end of this year, so it'll be nice to have a fresh start in a new place. I'm not going to sit here and say all dating apps are dangerous and no one should use them, but definitely cover your bases. Ask more questions before meeting someone. FaceTime them first. Skype. Anything. I was naive about it, and I regret it. Be safe, stick close to your friends, and try meeting people in more traditional ways. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. So this story just goes to show you that you never know who you're talking to. I know you've heard of a lot of stories of people saying they're females when they're guys, or vice versa. This person brought up a very good point. Try meeting people in the more traditional ways. Or if you are meeting them online, be very safe about it. A big thing also, when you use your Skype, go through your settings. Everyone can find your IP if you don't go change your settings, which can be traced right back to your home address. That's the reason I don't use a lot of social media. I only set them up so I could chat with everyone now, but I also go through and check all my settings, because that can be very dangerous. I'm glad they were able to change their phone number, actually get in touch with Facebook and deactivate their account. It could have gotten a lot worse, especially if they would have kept egging them on. Now, I'm also not going to say don't meet people online, because my wife, we met online, and we have an awesome relationship. Just be very careful, just like they stated. Some people are out there to hurt you, but not all. But still, be careful. Well, I hope you enjoyed my little take on this. I know it was a shorter video, but here in probably like 12 hours or less, there will be another video out. So make sure you're subscribed and keep a close eye out for that one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Oh, and on an off note, I'm hoping when he said girlfriends, he was meaning girls that were actually friends. Otherwise, he's kind of sounding like, I'm a player, I'm a player, I'm a player. Alright, I gotta go.